Guys, my name is Kirill. Welcome to Carismo HQ. Today we'll be walking you through an installation of a Carismo design custom steering wheel with an LED shift light on this beautiful Audi R8 here right behind me. I'll be running you through the process of the disassembly, assembly of your new steering wheel, as well as the LED wiring. This wheel in particular is our V1 traditional round top classic LED shift light steering wheel with the optional black optics trim, as well as metal paddle shifter replacements for the OEM plastic ones. Right behind us over here, you have a peek at some of the variations of the steering wheel designs that we carry. As you see, for example, we do carry the red Alcantara to match the OEM interior red, as well as a couple of other designs such as the cut top F1 and our signature flat top. Okay guys, first step as always, safety first. We start by disconnecting the negative terminal of the battery before we do any work on the vehicle. So, in the Audi R8, your battery is located in the frunk. We're going to pop the frunk. Once you come around here, you'll see that on the inside of your frunk, on the back wall, you have the battery tender panel. So I popped this open just a little bit earlier to show you. Basically all this is a hinged door, and the way you extract this door is you pry with a flathead screwdriver up top here on one of the corners to try to get it out. Just make sure you're actually getting the screwdriver behind the plastic panel, not behind the carpet panel, because you could actually separate those two. So you want to get the screwdriver behind that, pry from the top, and it should hinge itself open. It's a little bit of work, but you should be able to get it done. Now, the negative terminal of the battery is on the right-hand side of the car. So you want to disconnect the negative terminal. It is a tight space, so take your time with it. It's simply a 10mm wrench. Once you're done with that, just insulate it with something like a little microfiber towel so it doesn't contact to the actual terminal, and we can move on to the interior of the car to remove the steering wheel. Okay guys, we're inside of the vehicle. Now the first step is to remove the airbag. This is the first step to us getting the entire steering wheel assembly off the car. Simple tool here. All we need is one little Allen key, something sturdy, just to access the back housing of the steering wheel, which is where the release clips are located. So the procedure is pretty simple. Basically, there are two release clips on the airbag, one on the right-hand side, one on the left-hand side in the back of the housing. How you gain access to these release clips is through the back housing. Upon rotating the steering wheel 90 degrees, there's an access hole in the back of the housing. The way you gain a better visual of this is you grab your phone, put it in selfie mode, and you can just put it in the dash. What this will allow you to do is get a very clear visual of where that hole is as you're fishing for it, so as to begin the process of releasing the clip on one side. Once you've released the clip on one side, you rotate the steering wheel 180 degrees, and you repeat the same process on the hole of the other side. We have our Allen key tool here, we have our steering wheel here, and you see on the inside right here, the clip that holds the airbag is actually a U-shaped piece of metal wire, sturdy metal wire that can get bent away inward a little bit on both sides to release the two pegs that are actually holding the airbag in. So if we flip the steering wheel around here, we'll see the two release holes on the back that we were originally talking about. And when we rotate our steering wheel 90 degrees, that release hole will now be at the top. Your actual back of the steering column will be here, and the hole will be just exposed. So we're going to put our tool in this hole, and the motion that we want it at is basically perpendicular in, and then we push downward on the tool, right? We give it this type of motion. What this will do from the actual side of the airbag is we'll have our tool pushing the spring that holds the airbag in. Let me catch it here. It'll have the spring moving inward and releasing the peg that is holding the airbag in. So once we do that on both sides, the airbag will be able to simply pop out of the housing, and we'll be able to release that. Hopefully this helps out understand what you need to be doing when you're fishing around in the back of the steering wheel, because sometimes just releasing the airbag is the most time-consuming portion of the install.
2, 1.
Okay guys, your steering wheel airbag is unclipped on both sides. You're ready to remove it. All you're going to need now is a flathead screwdriver for the next step. So we're going to take the airbag out. As you see, the airbag is being held in by the yellow clock spring connector. First step, what we're going to do is we're going to take the flathead, we're going to find the orange tab at the top of the clock spring connector and pull that tab out to release the clock spring connector. And clock spring connector is coming out. So clock spring connector is connected to two other wires that need to be disconnected before the airbag can come out fully. At the top, you have a simple pin that doesn't actually have a release clip. It's all the way at the top of the housing. There's simply some gentle pressure applied to pull that out. There we go. And at the bottom, you have the same thing. Unhinge the wire, pull out the connector that is sitting in the rubber housing, and now we simply disconnect the silver from the big black piece, right? So there we go. Connector is out. We have our airbag fully disconnected. Wires disconnected. We can now put this aside and proceed removing the steering wheel itself. Next step is to untorque the center nut that holds the steering wheel in the actual car. Once that is untorqued, we'll be able to take the steering wheel off and proceed with the installation of the new Carismo design steering wheel. So, tools needed. It's a M12 bit, and obviously you just need some sort of lever to get that out. So there's some Loctite here on this car from the factory. It takes a little bit of force to break it loose. You might need a second pair of hands to hold the steering wheel tight while you wrench on it. I'm going to hold it with my knee and see if we can break it loose right now. There we go. Okay, broken loose. Now we're not going to untighten it all the way. A couple of spins so as to give it some distance, and now what we can do is we can safely wiggle the steering wheel off the spline without running the risk of yanking it off, trying to pull it off because it's stuck there, right? So now we know that it's fully off the splines. It's going to come off easily. At this point, we can remove the actual center nut all the way. Center nut is out, and now the steering wheel ever so gently comes off of the vehicle. We're ready for our next step. All right, guys, so we've got our steering wheel off the car. Next step for us is to take off all of the functional components off your OEM steering wheel. This includes your center trim, the buttons, the shift paddles, and transfer all of that onto your new Carismo design steering wheel. Now, if you ended up purchasing the optional black center trim or one set of our optional extended shift paddles, we'll be talking you through the process of transferring the buttons into that or the paddle mechanism into the paddles respectively. It all starts with us actually taking off the OEM parts from the original steering wheel anyway, so we'll get started with that. So guys, first step to removing the OEM center trim on your steering wheel is to grab a T20 Torx bit right here. And we will begin by unscrewing these 4 bolts right here along the perimeter of the steering wheel. The next step would be to grab, if you have access to a prying tool, like a trim removal tool, just a plastic tool. If not, you can honestly do this with your hands and fingers. I'm just using this to spare my skin because it does take a little bit of effort pulling that trim off. So we're going to basically pull out in an even fashion the silver trim around the left side, the silver trim around the right side, and the silver trim around the bottom of the steering wheel. This entire thing is a single piece item holding all of these guts internals in here. So you want to be pulling this out gently and evenly, right? So trim removal tool will simply help you to get under the section right here of the buttons and leverage it out a little bit. As you see right away, it's starting to move out. Same thing we're going to do on the other side, right here. And then the same thing we will do on the bottom right here. So once this is leveraged out a little bit, it's time to put the tool aside and actually try to evenly pull it with your hands. So it should look something like this. There you go. You see the trim loosened up. It's already out of the wheel. Now the only thing holding it in is a few wires. We're not going to yank it. We're not going to rip those wires. The next step will be to disconnect some of those wires as well as the paddles to be able to remove the trim fully. So with the trim released, the things to disconnect is 2 wires at the very top of the housing. That'll be your horn and your ground wires. One will be red, one will be black. There's a little pin on each. if you see on this black one, there's a little pin here. It depresses, and then the wire simply comes off. Right, so we have this little wire that comes off, boom, and the same thing here with the red one. This comes off as well. Just like that, we have both of those off. The last thing here to remove, and it is still a wire holding the trim, so don't pull that off completely, is the connector to your shift paddle. So this is rather critical here. The connector to your shift paddle is right here in the rubber housing next to the shift paddle, and it has a white tab. This white tab right here, it's imperative that you push the tab in all the way before you start yanking on the connector to take it out. The connector is pretty fragile. You could pull it off, just rip it out without depressing this white tab, and you could actually damage the connector, and we wouldn't want to do that because Audi doesn't sell this connector separately. Replacing it is a pain in the ass. So just take your time here, don't break anything, be gentle with it, and once that's released, we'll be able to take the trim off and remove the paddles. Okay, next up, we've got two screws on the left and right side. These two T10 Torx bit screws simply hold in the paddles. Unscrew those and you can pull the paddles right out of the housing. Last piece left to remove is the backing plate. Three T20 Torx bolts are holding this backing plate. Once you unscrew these, you'll be able to take out the backing plate and transfer it over onto your Carismo design steering wheel. If you ended up purchasing the black optic optional Carismo trim for your steering wheel, in this section we're going to show you how to transfer the buttons and the wiring from your OEM trim into your black optic trim. If you didn't end up purchasing this trim, just skip to the next section. Okay guys, we've got our center trim here. We're going to flip it right over, and there's going to be 4 bolts on the rings portion of it. These 4 bolts are T10 Torx bit screws. We're just going to unscrew these 4 bolts. Once those are out, there's going to be 2 additional per side. You're going to see 2 bolts holding your stop, start, and exhaust button if you have a plus, or just your stop, start button if you have a base. We're going to unscrew those as well. And then we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. 2 more. Good. Okay, so the bolts are out. The buttons should simply pop off now. And we should be able to take this black rubber ring off of the silver trim. So we're just going to pull that right off. As with all, pull evenly on all sides. There we go. Next up, we're going to remove the top connector along the trim. We're going to push the tab up top holding the connector in, and we're going to push that connector out from the housing. There we go. That's it. So last but not least, we're going to get these buttons out of the trim. 2 T10 bolts per side, and then the buttons come right out. So buttons are unscrewed. We're just going to pull these right out, and we're going to start pulling the harness, this entire harness, out of the steering wheel trim. There we go. That's it. This is your stock steering wheel trim. This can be set aside, and we're going to reassemble everything just the way we assembled it onto our black optic trim. So guys, we have our Carismo LED shift light steering wheel here. I just wanted to briefly mention, if you too are installing a LED shift light steering wheel, there's going to be the power wire, right? The power and ground wire coming out of the steering wheel. We're not touching this up until later in the installation. So as you will be assembling your steering wheel, reinstalling the original trim or your black optic trim and your paddles, be it OEM or ours, you want to make sure that this wire isn't covered by the trim or hidden away or inaccessible, because we'll be needing it later. Okay guys, so now we're going to talk about removing the OEM paddle shifter mechanism from your stock paddle and transferring that over into your new carbon fiber Carismo shift paddle. Be that the carbon fiber teardrop, carbon fiber Urus, or whether you got the Urus metal paddles, the procedure is all the same for all 3. We're going to grab your OEM paddles, And we're going to be transferring the mechanism here right into the housing of your new paddles. Okay guys, so we're going to grab a small flathead screwdriver or similar tool, and the goal here is in the paddle mechanism housing on the inside there's going to be a little gap. So basically there's a rod going through this mechanism holding the mechanism in place, and the rod is what we need to extract from the mechanism to remove the mechanism off of the paddle. To begin removing the rod, we're going to start by pushing the rod up to get enough of it poking through so we can grab it and pull it out with pliers. To do that, we're going to grab a thin, small flathead screwdriver and start prying the rod from the bottom upward until we have enough showing that we can grab it with some pliers. So this definitely takes a little bit of time, a little bit of patience, but as you can see, I'm slowly starting to get this rod displaced and more of it showing at the top. And now as you see, enough is showing for me to go ahead, grab it with some pliers, and pull it out. There we have the rod, and the paddle mechanism comes right out. So guys, installation is the reverse of disassembly. We're just going to take the paddle mechanism, we're going to place the paddle right on top of it like that, flip it over, and the mechanism is now seated on the paddle, and all that's left to do is to put the push pin through the original hoops. Okay guys, so we are going to now be putting the wheel back together. Anything in terms of installation is simply the reverse of how we were pulling it apart. We've taken the liberty to pre-assemble for you the black optics trim with its buttons and wiring harness, as well as the paddle set. And here we have our LED shift light steering wheel. When it comes to the LED shift light steering wheel, as I was mentioning before, we have the power wire for the LED shift light. This is to remain untouched. Make sure when you put the trim together that this wire is still accessible, and then we'll be handling that once we're back in the vehicle. Okay guys, we're here putting together the steering wheel. This is only applicable in the case that you have a LED shift light steering wheel. As we were talking earlier, you're gonna need to power your LED shift light. So the LED shift light is powered by this wire right here. You're gonna see a trio of wires here. There's a red wire, a black wire, and we cut away what is a third blue wire that is not applicable for this installation. Now, what we've gone ahead here and done is we've taken the top connector. The one on our car is from a 17 V10 Plus North America region. And on our connector, we have a purple and 4 black wires. So we've used a multimeter to find that the second and third wire, which is the first black and the second black wire next to the purple, actually give us a consistent 12 volts and a ground, which is exactly what we need for the LED steering wheel to be powered. So we've used that knowledge to grab the red wire, which is supposed to be our power wire for the LED steering wheel, and tapped it to the second wire, which is a 12 volt wire on the connector. In a similar fashion, we've used the black wire and tapped it to the third wire on the connector, which is going to be our ground. So now we have adequate power and ground for our LED steering wheel, and when all of the modules in this bundle, in this congregation of wires, get their power from the vehicle, the LED steering wheel in turn will get its power, which will power it on, and everything should be working properly. Now again, before you blindly copy this configuration, please make sure you do use a voltmeter to double check that you're actually getting the same 12 volts and ground that we are getting here. And if you aren't, if for some reason a different year or different harness is supplied in your R8, please do use that voltmeter to find an adequate place to get yourself the 12 volts and ground that is needed to power your LED. Okay guys, the steering wheel is now fully assembled. We've put together the center trim, buttons, shift paddles are on there. We're ready to take this over to the car, plug it in, punch the airbag in the car, and take it for a rip, see how it feels. Okay guys, we're back in the car. We're ready to put our steering wheel back on. When it comes to our LED shift light steering wheel customers, this is the point at which we just made sure to tap our power and ground wire to the adequate 12 volt and ground source for the steering wheel. In this particular scenario, we tapped it to the first 2 black wires adjacent to the purple wire in the top connector. The first black wire is the 12 volt wire. The second black wire was the ground wire. Now, this is very specific to harness, region, and year of car. Each wiring harness and each wiring diagram of a car could differ, so please do make sure to refer to your usage of a multimeter. Either use a multimeter to find where to tap for 12 volts and ground yourself, or ask your technician to figure out where to be sourcing that power. So now that the steering wheel is all assembled, we're going to be putting it back on, making sure everything works. We'll be plugging in our OBD 2-port module, putting the airbag back in, and taking the car for a spin. Okay guys, airbag. We do the old school plugging back in of everything that we unplugged. Bottom connector, plug that in. We're gonna stash it away in the rubber housing portion for which there's space provided. Then we're going to move on to our next connector, which is up here at the top. Also the same connector that we use to power our LED shift light steering wheel. And then all that's left is the yellow clock spring connector. Don't forget, we're gonna plug it in, and then we're also gonna make sure to depress the holding clip. All right, come here. There we go. Orange holding clip depressed. We're ready to go. Guys, the LED steering wheel is on the car. The last step for the LED crowd is we're gonna grab the Carismo design module and the bundle, the wiring bundle. The gray plug of the wiring bundle is the only thing that goes into this module. Plug that right in. And then we're obviously gonna have the OBD 2-port connector. We're just gonna plug that straight into our OBD 2 port, and we're gonna tuck this away nicely and neatly. You could use a zip tie, whatever you prefer, to get it out of the way of your leg. And after that, we'll be ready to start up the car and take this wheel for a spin. Guys, thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was informative and helpful for your installation. If you have any other questions, or if you just like to reach out, place an order, or ask about a custom build, feel free to reach out to us. The easiest way to get in touch with us is on Instagram at Carismo Design, or shoot us an email at shop@carismodesign, or feel free to give us a phone call. Thank you very much for watching. See you on the next one.